How to tell a great story. Welcome to Audiowaves. Think about the last time you were completely captivated by someone speaking. Chances are they were not reciting facts, reading off a spreadsheet, or using big, complicated words. They were telling a story. Stories are the universal language of human connection. In this book, we are going to uncover how you can master this art. We will not use complicated theories or boring academic definitions. Instead, we will explore simple, practical tools to help you share your voice, connect deeply with others, and make your words unforgettable. Before we begin, I have a simple task for you. Please go to the comment section below and tell me the answer to this simple question. What is the last story you heard that made you cry or feel deeply moved? Now, let us begin. Chapter 1. The Chemistry of Connection. To understand how to become a master of communication, we must first look inside the human brain. Many people believe that being a great speaker is a magical talent. They think you are either born with a charismatic personality or you are doomed to be ignored. This is a complete myth. The truth is much more empowering. Captivating an audience has nothing to do with magic. It has everything to do with biology. When you speak, you have the power to literally change the chemical makeup of the brain of your listener. This chapter will teach you exactly how to do that. We will focus on the actionable steps you can take today to harness this biological power. You will learn how to trigger specific hormones that make people lean in, trust you, and remember your words forever. Let us start by looking at a fascinating study conducted by a neuroscientist named Dr. Paul Zak. Dr. Zak wanted to know why human beings care so much about the experiences of total strangers. He decided to test this by showing a short video to a group of participants. The video told the true story of a father and his 2-year-old son named Ben. Ben was terminally ill. The story was simple but deeply emotional. The father spoke about the pain of knowing his time with his son was limited. Before and after the participants watched this video, Dr. Zak and his team took blood samples to measure their hormone levels. The results of this study were absolutely incredible. Dr. Zak discovered that the story triggered the release of 2 very specific chemicals in the brains of the viewers. The first chemical was cortisol. You might know cortisol as the stress hormone. When we encounter tension or a problem, our brain releases cortisol to force us to pay attention. In the context of a story, cortisol acts as an attention grabber. It makes the listener sit up and focus on what is happening. The distress in the story of the father and his son caused the viewers to release cortisol, which meant they were fully locked into the narrative. But cortisol alone is not enough to make a story impactful. The second chemical that Dr. Zak measured was oxytocin. Oxytocin is often called the love hormone or the trust hormone. It's the chemical responsible for feelings of empathy, bonding, and deep human connection. When the viewers felt the emotional pain of the father, their brains flooded with oxytocin. They were no longer just watching a video about a stranger. Biologically, they were experiencing a deep sense of care and empathy for this man and his child. The most practical and fascinating part of this study was what happened next. After the video, the participants were given the opportunity to donate money to a charity that helps sick children. Dr. Zak found that he could actually predict how much money a person would donate simply by looking at the levels of oxytocin in their blood. The higher the oxytocin, the more generous the person became. The story literally changed their brain chemistry, which then changed their physical behavior in the real world. This brings us to the most important question for you. How can you use this knowledge to become a better communicator? Let us break down the actionable steps to trigger these chemicals in your own life. We will start with cortisol, the attention hormone. If you want people to listen to you, you must introduce a problem or a challenge early in your story. Many people make the mistake of starting their stories with long, boring introductions. They give too much background information. They describe the weather, the time of day, and what they had for breakfast. By the time they get to the interesting part, the audience has already stopped listening. To trigger cortisol, you must start with the trouble. You must create a gap between what is and what could be. Think about a time you faced an obstacle. Instead of telling the whole backstory, drop your listener right into the moment of tension. For example, instead of explaining how you prepared for a job interview for 3 weeks, start by saying that you spilled hot coffee all over your white shirt 5 minutes before you walked into the interview room. Immediately, the brain of your listener releases a small spike of cortisol. They think to themselves, how is this person going to fix this problem? They are hooked. They must know the answer. This is the first practical tool in your storytelling toolbox. Always introduce a problem to secure the attention of your audience. Now we move to oxytocin, the trust hormone. Once you have their attention, you must make them care. You do this by showing vulnerability. People do not connect with perfection. They connect with struggle. They connect with humanity. If you only talk about your successes, you will seem distant and unapproachable. But if you share your doubts, your fears, and your moments of weakness, the brains of your listeners will respond by releasing oxytocin. They will feel empathy for you. Let us look at how you can apply this in a practical setting. Imagine you are leading a team at work. You need to motivate them to tackle a very difficult project. You could just give them a list of facts and deadlines, but this will not inspire them. Instead, you can share a story about a time when you personally failed at a similar project. Tell them about the frustration you felt. Tell them about the mistakes you made. By being open and honest, you trigger oxytocin in the minds of your team members. They see you as a real human being. Trust is built instantly. They will be far more willing to follow you and work hard because they feel biologically connected to you. The third chemical you must understand is dopamine. Dopamine is the reward chemical. It is released when we experience pleasure, satisfaction, or when we achieve a goal. In the world of storytelling, dopamine is released when a story reaches a satisfying resolution. When the problem you introduced at the beginning is finally solved, the brain of your listener is rewarded with a hit of dopamine. This makes the experience feel incredibly good. But more importantly, dopamine acts as a memory enhancer. When dopamine is present, the brain records the information more deeply. This is why we remember great stories for years, but we forget a list of statistics within 5 minutes. How do you trigger dopamine? You must always deliver a resolution. You must close the gap that you opened at the beginning. If you start a story about spilling coffee on your shirt, you must tell the listener how that situation ended. Did you wear the stained shirt and make a joke about it to the interviewer? Did you run to a nearby store and buy a new one? The audience needs that closure to get their dopamine reward. The practical lesson here is to always know the ending of your story before you begin speaking. Never leave your audience hanging. Give them the satisfaction of a resolution, and they will remember your message long after you have finished speaking. Beyond the chemical release of hormones, there is another biological phenomenon that occurs when you tell a story. It is perhaps the most incredible discovery in the field of neuroscience and communication. A researcher named Dr. Uri Hassan at Princeton University conducted a series of studies to see what happens to the brain waves of a storyteller and a listener. He used advanced brain scanning technology to monitor people while they were communicating. What he found is known as neural coupling. When a person is simply reciting facts, their brain lights up in areas related to language processing. The brain of the listener also lights up in those same language areas. But when the speaker begins to tell a deeply engaging story, something magical happens. The brain waves of the listener begin to synchronize with the brain waves of the storyteller. They literally begin to match. If the emotional center of the speaker lights up, the emotional center of the listener lights up just a fraction of a second later. Dr. Hassan described this as a dance between two brains. Through storytelling, you are essentially taking the neural patterns in your own head and replicating them in the head of someone else. You are transferring your memories and your experiences directly into their mind. They are not just hearing your words. Biologically, they are experiencing your story as if it is happening to them. This is why your heart races when you hear a scary story, even if you are sitting safely in your own living room. Your brain is mirroring the experience. The practical application of neural coupling is profound. It means that to make an audience feel something, you must genuinely feel it yourself as you speak. You cannot fake a good story. If you are bored while you are talking, your audience will be bored. Their brains are trying to mirror yours. If your brain is not engaged, theirs will not be either. To harness the power of neural coupling, you must fully immerse yourself in the memory you are sharing. Recall the sensory details. What did the room look like? How did the air feel? What specific emotions were running through your body? Let us practice this right now. If you want to tell a story about a moment of great joy, do not just say you were happy. Describe the physical sensation of that joy. Describe how your chest felt light. Describe how you could not stop smiling. Describe the exact words someone said to you that made you realize you had succeeded. By reliving the sensory and emotional details, your brain lights up with those specific neural patterns. Through neural coupling, your listeners will automatically mirror those exact same patterns. You will make them feel the joy with you. This is the ultimate form of human connection. Now, let us build a step-by-step framework that you can use every single day to apply these biological principles. We will call this the Chemistry of Connection framework. It consists of 3 clear, actionable steps that you can practice in your daily conversations. Whether you are speaking to your spouse, presenting to a client, or making a video for the internet, these 3 steps will ensure that you are engaging the biology of your audience. Step 1 is the cortisol hook. Before you open your mouth to speak, ask yourself what is the central conflict or problem in the message you want to share. You must identify the trouble. Once you know the problem, start your communication right at the edge of that problem. Cut out the first 3 sentences you were planning to say. Drop the listener right into the action. If you are trying to convince a customer to buy a product, do not start by listing the features of the product. Start by describing a frustrating problem that the customer faces every day. Make them feel the tension of that problem. Make their brain release that crucial attention-gathering cortisol. Step 2 is the oxytocin bridge. Once you have their attention, you must build trust. You do this by revealing the human element. Share a personal anecdote related to the problem. Be honest about a time you struggled with it. Show your vulnerability. If you are a parent trying to teach your child a lesson, do not just give them a rigid set of rules. Tell them a story about a time when you were their age and you made a huge mistake. Tell them how scared you felt when you realized you had messed up. This honesty will flood their brain with oxytocin. They will no longer see you as an authoritative dictator. They will see you as a trusted guide. This biological shift is the secret to true influence. Step 3 is the dopamine delivery. You have grabbed their attention. You have built deep trust. Now you must reward them. You must guide the story toward a clear, satisfying resolution. This is where you provide the answer to the problem you introduced in step 1. But the key to a great dopamine delivery is to keep it simple and focused. Do not wander off into unrelated topics. Bring the narrative to a precise point. Share the lesson you learned. Share the solution you found. Let the audience feel the release of tension. This is the moment where their brains encode the experience into long-term memory. They will leave the interaction feeling satisfied, rewarded, and deeply impacted by your words. It is crucial to understand that practicing this framework requires patience and awareness. You will not become a master storyteller overnight, but you can begin today by observing the stories around you. Watch your favorite movies and pay attention to how the director introduces conflict to trigger cortisol. Listen to the most popular speakers and notice how they use personal struggles to build an oxytocin bridge with the audience. Read great books and feel the dopamine release when the plot finally resolves. By becoming aware of these biological mechanisms, you will start to see them everywhere. Let us explore another real-world application to further solidify these concepts. Imagine you are attending a networking event. These events are often filled with awkward small talk and superficial conversations. People usually introduce themselves by stating their name, their job title, and a few boring facts about their company. No one remembers these introductions because they do not trigger any chemical response in the brain. They are flat and lifeless. You can completely change the dynamic of a networking event by using the chemistry of connection. When someone asks you what you do for a living, do not just give them your job title. Give them a micro-story. Start with a cortisol hook. For example, you might say, "You know how incredibly stressful it is when a small business suddenly loses all of its digital data in a system crash." Immediately, you have introduced a problem. The listener is paying attention. Then move to the oxytocin bridge. You could say, "I used to run a small shop myself, and I remember the absolute panic of losing a week worth of customer orders. It felt like the end of the world." Now you have shown vulnerability and built empathy. Finally, deliver the dopamine resolution. You conclude by saying, "That is exactly why I started my current company, where we build reliable backup systems so that no business owner ever has to feel that panic again." In less than 30 seconds, you have taken a stranger on a biological journey. You have spiked their attention, built a bridge of trust, and rewarded them with a satisfying conclusion. They will remember you long after the networking event is over. This is the profound power of understanding the chemistry of connection. You do not need to be the loudest person in the room. You do not need to have the most outgoing personality. You simply need to align your words with the natural biology of the human brain. We must also talk about the common traps and mistakes that people make when trying to tell stories. The first major mistake is the fear of vulnerability. Many individuals believe that in order to be respected, they must always appear perfect and in control. This is especially true in professional environments. People wear masks of competence and hide their failures. However, as we have learned from the science of oxytocin, perfection is the enemy of connection. When you present yourself as flawless, you create a barrier between yourself and your audience. Their brains do not release the trust hormone because there is nothing for them to empathize with. To overcome this fear, you must reframe how you view vulnerability. Sharing your struggles is not a sign of weakness. It is a profound display of courage. It takes immense strength to stand before others and admit that you do not have all the answers. When you take this brave step, your audience will not judge you. Instead, they will breathe a sigh of relief. They will see their own imperfections reflected in your story. They will feel a deep sense of belonging and trust. You must permit yourself to be human. Let your cracks show. That is where the light of connection enters. The second common mistake is data dumping. In our modern world, we are obsessed with statistics, charts, and metrics. We think that if we just provide enough data, people will logically agree with our point of view. But human beings are not logical creatures. We are emotional creatures who use logic to justify our feelings. If you only provide raw data, you are completely bypassing the emotional centers of the brain. You are failing to trigger the neural coupling that Dr. Hassan discovered. This does not mean that data is useless. It simply means that data must be wrapped in a narrative. You must put a human face on the numbers. If you are giving a presentation about a new health initiative, do not just say that the program will improve lives by 20%. Tell the story of one specific person whose life was transformed by the program. Describe their daily struggles before the program. Describe the emotional relief they felt after receiving help. Once the audience is emotionally invested in this one person, the statistic of 20% will carry massive weight. The story opens the heart and the data satisfies the mind. As we continue to explore the depths of this chemistry, it is important to reflect on your own life. You are a living library of unique experiences. Every challenge you have faced, every heartbreak you have endured, and every victory you have celebrated is a powerful tool waiting to be used. Many people discount their own lives. They think their stories are not exciting enough to share. They believe that unless they have climbed a massive mountain or survived a shipwreck, they have nothing of value to say. This is fundamentally untrue. The most powerful stories are often the smallest ones. They are the everyday moments of realization, the quiet struggles, and the simple joys. A story about learning to bake bread with your grandmother can be just as biologically impactful as a story about traveling to space, provided it is told with authenticity and emotion. The brain does not measure the scale of the events. It measures the depth of the emotion. If you felt real frustration, real love, or real relief, your audience will feel it too. Your life is deeply valuable, and your experiences are worthy of being shared. To truly master this craft, you must become a student of everyday life. You must start paying attention to the moments that make you feel something. Keep a small notebook or use your phone to write down brief notes when you experience a strong emotion. Did a conversation with a stranger make you smile? Write it down. Did a mistake at work make you feel embarrassed? Write it down. Over time, you will build a vast collection of raw material. When you need to communicate a specific message, you can look through your collection and find the perfect human experience to illustrate your point. Let us dive deeper into the mechanics of sensory language. We touched on this briefly when discussing neural coupling, but it is a critical skill that requires dedicated practice. The human brain processes the world through the 5 senses: sight, sound, touch, taste, and smell. When you use words that activate these senses, you are essentially hacking the brain of your listener. You are forcing their neural pathways to simulate the experience. Instead of saying the food was bad, say the meat was tough, cold, and tasted like damp cardboard. Immediately, the listener imagines the unpleasant texture and flavor. Their brain reacts as if they are eating it themselves. Instead of saying you were nervous, describe how your palms were sweating, your throat was completely dry, and your heart was hammering against your ribs like a trapped bird. These specific sensory details bypass the logical filter of the listener and hit them directly in the emotional core. When you practice adding sensory details, be careful not to overdo it. You do not need to describe every single object in a room. You only need to highlight the details that matter to the emotion of the story. If you are telling a story about feeling lonely, you might describe the sound of a ticking clock in an empty apartment, or the cold glow of a television screen in the dark. These specific details paint a vivid picture and amplify the emotional resonance of the narrative. Let us also address the concept of pacing. The speed at which you deliver your story has a direct impact on the chemical reactions in the brain. When you are introducing the cortisol hook and building tension, you can speed up your delivery slightly. Short, sharp sentences create a feeling of urgency. The listener leans in. Their heart rate might even increase slightly to match your rhythm. But when you reach the most emotional part of the story, the vulnerable moment where oxytocin is crucial, you must slow down. Pausing is one of the most powerful tools a speaker possesses. A well-placed pause allows the emotion of your words to wash over the audience. It gives their brains time to process the empathy and release the oxytocin. Many inexperienced speakers rush through their most painful or vulnerable moments because they feel uncomfortable. They want to get it over with quickly. You must resist this urge. Stand firm in the emotion, deliver the vulnerable sentence, and then hold the silence. Let the audience feel the weight of your truth. The silence is where the deepest connection happens. As we draw near the end of this chapter, I want to leave you with a profound sense of empowerment. You now possess knowledge that the vast majority of people will never understand. You know that communication is not about manipulation or performance. It is about biological resonance. It is about aligning your humanity with the humanity of others. You have the ability to spike attention with cortisol, build deep bridges of trust with oxytocin, and leave lasting memories with dopamine. You understand the magic of neural coupling, the dance of two minds syncing in perfect harmony. You have a voice that deserves to be heard. The world is desperate for authentic voices. We are drowning in a sea of superficial content, fake perfection, and meaningless data. People are starving for real connection. They want to hear your struggles. They want to learn from your resolutions. They want to feel the shared human experience that only a true story can provide. You have a responsibility to share your voice. Do not hide your experiences in the dark. Bring them into the light. Use the tools of biology to craft messages that heal, inspire, and unite. Chapter 2. Start with the trouble. Welcome to the second chapter of our journey. Let us talk about the most expensive and highly sought-after currency in the modern world. It is not money, it is not gold, it is not real estate. It is human attention. In our fast-paced digital age, capturing and holding the attention of someone else has become a monumental challenge. People are constantly distracted, overwhelmed, and looking for the next quick hit of entertainment. If you want to tell a story that truly connects, you must learn how to grab your audience from the very first breath you take. You cannot ease into your story. You cannot warm up the room slowly. You must start with the trouble. Let us look at the cold, hard facts about how human beings consume information today. According to extensive research, the average human attention span has drastically changed over the past 2 decades. In the year 2000, the average attention span was reported to be 12 seconds. Today, many studies, including those analyzing digital behavior and marketing trends, suggest that the average attention span of an internet user has dropped to just about 8.25 seconds. This is a staggering reality. Furthermore, research by Dr. Gloria Mark, a psychologist who specializes in how digital media affects our lives, calculated that the average attention span for a person looking at a screen hit a new low of 47 seconds in recent years, down from 150 seconds in 2004. The window you have to engage a potential listener is shrinking rapidly. If you are communicating on social media, the rules are even more brutal. Marketers and content creators often refer to the 3-second rule. Statistically, a massive percentage of website visitors decide whether to stay or leave within the first few seconds. On platforms featuring short-form video, if you do not hook your viewer within the first 3 seconds, they will simply swipe away to the next piece of content. Why is this happening? It is not necessarily because our brains are completely broken. It is because of extreme attention competition. Every single minute, thousands of hours of video are uploaded to the internet, and millions of new posts go live. We are living in an all-you-can-eat buffet of digital dopamine. Your story is not just competing with other stories in the room. It is competing with every notification, every email, every news alert, and every viral video vibrating in the pocket of your listener. So, how do you win this massive battle for attention? You must use a technique that master storytellers have relied on for thousands of years. It is a classical Latin phrase called in media res. This translates directly to in the midst of things. When you start your story in media res, you completely bypass the traditional boring introduction. You do not give the background information. You do not introduce all the characters. You do not describe the setting or the weather. Instead, you drop your audience directly into the middle of the action, right at the moment of highest tension. Think about your favorite action movies or thriller novels. They almost never start with the main character waking up, brushing their teeth, having a quiet breakfast, and driving to the office to receive a mission. If a movie started like that, you would likely turn it off before the first commercial break. Instead, a movie like a James Bond film starts with a high-speed motorcycle chase on the roof of a moving train. The audience has absolutely no idea who the bad guys are. They have no idea what is inside the secret briefcase being chased. But they do not care. They are instantly locked in. They are hooked. The movie then uses the next 20 minutes to slowly backfill the context and explain how the character ended up on that train. The tension was established first, and the explanation came second. This technique works because of a powerful psychological phenomenon known as the open loop, or the information gap. When you start a story in the middle of a crisis, you open a cognitive loop in the brain of your listener. The human brain hates unanswered questions. It seeks closure. It becomes completely obsessed with closing that loop. When you present a problem before you give the context, the brain is forced into a state of high focus. If you start a high-stakes business presentation by saying, "We have a 40% chance of losing our biggest enterprise client next quarter," you have instantly dropped your audience into the middle of the action. Their brains are suddenly wide awake. They need to know why this is happening and how it can be fixed. They will pay attention to every single word you say next, because they are desperately craving the resolution. Contrast this with the way most people naturally tell stories. Most beginners make the fatal mistake of chronological storytelling. They want to set the stage perfectly. They think the audience needs to know everything that led up to the event to fully appreciate it. Let us imagine you are telling a story about a disastrous job interview that changed your career path. A chronological storyteller would start by saying, "It was a Tuesday morning last November. I woke up around 6. I made some coffee. I ironed my white shirt. I was feeling pretty nervous because this job was really important to me, and I had prepared for weeks. I got in my car, and the traffic on the highway was unusually bad." By the time you reach the part about the traffic, your listener has mentally checked out. There is no trouble. There is no tension. A story without a problem is just a boring report of chronological events. Nobody cares about your morning routine unless it directly impacts the climax of the story. Now, let us rewrite that exact same story using the principle of in media res. You cut out the entire morning. You cut out the waking up, the traffic, and the general nervousness. You start right at the point of maximum trouble. You say, "I was standing right outside the interview room, staring down at a massive dark brown coffee stain spreading across the center of my crisp white shirt, and the hiring manager was just opening the door to call my name." Do you feel the incredible difference? In the second version, the listener is instantly hooked. You have created a powerful open loop. The listener is thinking, "Oh no, what did they do? Did they try to hide the stain? Did they go in anyway and pretend it was not there? Did they get the job despite the mess? Because you started with the trouble, you have earned the right to go back and explain the context." After that opening sentence, you can say, "Let me tell you how I ended up in this absolute nightmare." Then you can briefly mention the morning rush and the spilled coffee, but you must secure their attention first. To make this highly practical, let us look at the teachings of renowned storytelling experts like Donald Miller and Matthew Dix. In his highly successful framework for building a brand story, Donald Miller emphasizes that every compelling narrative centers around a character who has a very specific problem. The problem is the engine of the story. Without a problem, the car simply does not move forward. Miller advises that if you are telling a story about yourself or your business, you must be willing to show your struggles, your doubts, and your mistakes. Perfection is incredibly boring. Humanity, struggle, and trouble are what attract people to you. Your trouble is what makes you relatable to another human being. Do not hide the problem. Put it front and center. Furthermore, Miller teaches a brilliant concept about positioning. He says that in a great story, you are not the hero. The person listening to you or your customer is the hero. You are merely the guide. Think of Star Wars. You are not Luke Skywalker. You are Yoda. To be a great guide, you must prove that you understand the trouble the hero is facing. When you start your story by highlighting a massive problem or a piece of trouble, you immediately show the listener that you understand their pain. You establish trust. You prove that you have navigated the dark woods and survived. Matthew Dix, a champion storyteller who has won countless live competitions, talks about finding the 5-second moment of your story. He explains that every great story is ultimately about a 5-second moment of profound realization, transformation, or fundamental change. It is the exact moment you realized you were entirely wrong, the moment you finally found your courage, or the moment your perspective on life shifted forever. When you know what that 5-second transformation is, you can identify the exact piece of trouble that forced that transformation to happen in the first place. You must structure your entire hook around that initial trouble. Dix also suggests a practice called homework for life, where you sit down every day and ask yourself what happened today that was story-worthy, focusing on the small moments of tension and change. We can also draw incredible inspiration from Nancy Duarte, a renowned communication expert and graphic designer. She analyzes the greatest speeches in human history and points out a brilliant technique she calls sparklines. A sparkline is a method of contrasting the ordinary, troubled world with an ideal, beautiful world. It compares what currently is with what could potentially be. By highlighting this contrast early in your speech or presentation, you draw immediate attention to a massive problem. You create an intense desire for change in your audience. You show the audience the trouble in their current reality, which makes them desperately want the solution you are about to offer. Martin Luther King Jr. used this exact technique in his famous "I Have a Dream" speech, painting a stark, painful contrast between the racist reality of the present day and the beautiful, equal possibility of the future. Now let us break this down into deeply actionable steps that you can practice every single day. How do you actually train your brain to start with the trouble? It requires breaking old habits and forming new neural pathways. Step 1. Identify the climax. Before you even open your mouth to begin speaking, you must ask yourself a crucial question. What is the most dramatic, emotional, or interesting moment of this message? What is the peak of the mountain? You must clearly define the trouble. If your story does not have a moment of trouble, conflict, or tension, then it is honestly not a story you should be telling. It is just a statement of facts. Find the exact moment things went completely wrong, got incredibly complicated, or became overwhelmingly challenging. That is your starting line. Step 2. Ruthlessly cut the preamble. Once you've identified the climax, you must brutally eliminate the background information. A fantastic rule of thumb is to look at the first 3 sentences you plan to say and throw them straight into the garbage. Force yourself to begin your narrative right on the bleeding edge of the trouble. If you're telling a story about getting horribly lost in a foreign city during a vacation, do not start with booking the plane tickets online. Do not talk about the taxi ride to the airport. Start with standing in the freezing, pouring rain at midnight, your phone battery completely dead, utterly unable to read the foreign street signs, and realizing you have no idea where your hotel is. Step 3. Craft the shock factor hook. Sometimes starting with the trouble means dropping a highly surprising fact, a bold statement, or an unexpected visual right at the very beginning. You want to elicit a visceral reaction from your audience. You want them to think, wait, what did they just say? For example, if you are giving a health presentation on the dangers of poor nutrition, do not start by saying, today we will discuss the importance of healthy eating habits. That is an academic bore. Start by saying, last year, the average person in this country consumed enough refined, toxic sugar to fill an entire industrial bathtub. This creates an immediate physical shock. It introduces a massive, horrifying problem. The audience is instantly awake, slightly scared, and wondering how to solve this terrifying issue. Let us look at how this applies to different, highly practical areas of your daily life. Imagine you are trying to sell a product, a service, or even just an idea to your boss. The absolute biggest mistake salespeople and professionals make is starting with the features of their product or the mechanics of their idea. They say, our new software has these 10 amazing functions. It integrates with everything, and it is incredibly fast. The customer or the boss does not care. They are bored out of their minds. Instead, you must start with the agonizing trouble the customer is facing. You say every single week, your tired team wastes 15 painful hours manually entering data, which is currently costing your business thousands of dollars in lost productivity and burning out your best employees. Now you have their undivided attention. You have identified their deepest pain. Only after you have firmly established the trouble can you introduce your software or your idea as the ultimate hero that will save the day. This profound principle even applies to your personal relationships and difficult high-stakes conversations. A phenomenal book called Crucial Conversations, written by Kerry Patterson and a team of researchers, teaches people exactly how to handle high-stakes, emotionally charged discussions. While it is absolutely crucial to establish a feeling of mutual safety first, the best communicators in the world do not beat around the bush. They address the conflict clearly, directly, and respectfully. They do not hide the trouble behind thick layers of awkward small talk. If you need to address a serious problem with a partner, a spouse, or a close friend, starting with a clear, factual description of the trouble is far more effective than dropping vague hints or acting passive-aggressively. Research from the Gottman Institute, which has studied relationships for over 40 years, shows that specificity is the key to conflict resolution. When you name precise behaviors and start with the exact trouble, people cannot deflect as easily. You must be brave enough to put the actual problem firmly on the table. You might be wondering why human beings are so deeply, biologically obsessed with trouble. Why do we gravitate toward conflict like a moth to a flame? Why does tension hold our attention so completely? The answer goes all the way back to our most ancient evolutionary survival instincts. For millions of years, the human brain was hardwired to constantly scan the surrounding environment for threats. If our ancient ancestors heard a sudden rustling in the bushes, their brains immediately focused all their processing power on the potential trouble. Was it a hungry tiger? Was it a venomous snake? Paying attention to trouble was literally a matter of life and death. Even though we no longer live in the dangerous wild, our brains still operate heavily on this primitive programming. The part of our brain called the limbic system is constantly, relentlessly scanning our daily environment for threats or rewards. When you introduce a problem, a conflict, or a serious piece of trouble in your story, you are directly triggering this ancient survival mechanism. You are signaling to the deepest part of the brain of your listener that this information is critically important. Their subconscious mind screams at them, "Pay close attention. There is a serious problem here, and you might urgently need to know how to survive it." This is exactly why stories of failure, struggle, and eventual redemption are universally more captivating than stories of easy, overnight success. If you stand on a stage and tell a story about how you casually started a business, everything went perfectly according to plan, and you became a multimillionaire in a single month, people will absolutely despise that story. It is arrogant, it is boring, and it is completely unrelatable. It severely lacks the essential human element of trouble. But if you tell a story about how you started a business, lost all your life savings, had to sleep on the freezing concrete floor of your empty office, and almost completely gave up before finally finding a massive breakthrough, people will hang on your every single word. They desperately want to know how you survived the immense trouble. They want to learn from your deep resilience. This brings us to a very deep, beautiful, and highly empowering realization. Your personal troubles, your embarrassing mistakes, and your painful failures are not dark secrets to be ashamed of. They are your absolute greatest assets as a communicator. They are the golden keys that unlock true human connection. The renowned author and researcher Brené Brown built her entire incredible career on the core principle of vulnerability. She discovered through years of research that we connect with others not through our shining strengths, but through our shared, messy vulnerabilities. When you are brave enough to share the difficult, troubled parts of your life, you give everyone else in the room silent permission to be human too. When you start your story with the trouble, you are essentially saying to your audience, "I am not perfect. I have faced massive obstacles. I have been deeply scared. I have been completely lost." This raw honesty builds an unbreakable bond of trust. The audience instantly roots for you. They deeply want to see you overcome the trouble because, in a profound psychological way, they are projecting their own daily struggles onto you. If you can overcome your massive obstacles, it gives them the hope that maybe they can overcome theirs. Mastering the beautiful art of the hook requires dedicated, intentional practice. You must actively develop a brand new reflex. Most of us have been heavily trained by the traditional education system to write dry, academic essays. In school, we were taught to start with a very broad introduction, carefully present a thesis statement, provide 3 boring paragraphs of supporting evidence, and end with a repetitive summary conclusion. This structure is excellent for passing a high school history exam, but it is absolute poison for real-world storytelling. It is the fastest possible way to put a modern audience straight to sleep. You must aggressively unlearn this academic habit. You must train yourself to think exactly like a Hollywood movie director. A great director looks at a written script and immediately asks, "Where is the action? Where does this scene actually begin?" You must do the exact same thing with your words. Let us practice this critical mental shift right now with a few everyday, highly relatable examples. Scenario A. You want to tell your co-workers about a terrible vacation you just took, the boring, academic way. Last summer, my family decided to visit the mountains for a relaxing trip. We packed the car on Friday morning. We drove for 6 long hours. The scenery was initially very nice, but then it started raining heavily, and our main tent collapsed, the powerful in media res way. It was 3 in the morning, the freezing rain was coming down in sideways sheets, and I was desperately trying to hold up a snapped tent pole while sitting in a massive puddle of freezing mud. Let me tell you all about my incredibly relaxing mountain vacation. Scenario B. You are giving a heartfelt toast at the wedding of your best friend, the boring academic way. "Hello, everyone. Thank you all for coming tonight. I have known the groom for 10 wonderful years. We first met in college. He's a really great guy, and I'm so incredibly happy he finally found love, the powerful in media res way. The very first time I met John, he was actively trying to cook dry pasta inside a coffee maker, and he nearly burned down our entire college dormitory. That was the exact moment I knew this man needed serious, professional help, and thank God he finally found it in his beautiful new wife. Scenario C. You are writing a powerful post for social media about a deep lesson you learned regarding burnout. The boring academic way. Today, I really want to talk to you all about the extreme importance of mental health in the workplace. It is very crucial to take breaks and avoid total burnout. I personally learned this the very hard way last year, the powerful, in media res way. I woke up on a random Tuesday morning, looked at my open laptop, and instantly burst into tears for absolutely no logical reason. My physical body had completely and totally shut down. That was the terrifying day I realized I was running entirely on empty. Notice how the second version in each of these scenarios instantly grabs you by the collar. It paints a highly vivid, unforgettable picture. It introduces a massive, undeniable conflict. It makes you desperately want to hear the rest of the narrative. Now, while the initial hook is absolutely crucial for grabbing that expensive attention, you must also learn how to expertly sustain that attention. Once you have firmly dropped the audience into the trouble, you cannot immediately solve the problem. If the trouble is resolved too quickly, the story loses all its power. You must learn the delicate art of stretching the tension. This involves mastering your pacing. When you introduce the central conflict, take a moment to deeply describe how it actually felt. Lean heavily into the sensory language we discussed in our previous chapter. Let the audience feel the crushing weight of the trouble. If you are trapped in the pouring rain with a broken tent, deeply describe the freezing cold water running down your shivering back. Describe the terrifying howling sound of the wind. Describe the dark, sinking feeling of complete helplessness in your gut. By expanding beautifully on the trouble, you dramatically raise the emotional stakes. The bigger and darker the trouble feels, the more powerful and satisfying the eventual resolution will be. There is a brilliant storytelling structure called the mountain. This structure perfectly maps out the rising tension in a narrative. You start by setting the scene very briefly, right in the action, and then you introduce a series of small, escalating challenges. These challenges act as stepping stones, gradually increasing the tension until you reach the massive climactic peak. Imagine a brilliant television series where each episode introduces a new, stressful complication, building up to a massive, explosive season finale. Your story should operate on a very similar principle. Once the initial hook secures the attention, you must expertly guide the audience up the steep mountain of tension. You let them see you desperately try to solve the problem and fail miserably. You let them see the heavy obstacles multiplying. You keep them craving the ultimate, releasing resolution. Another incredible concept is the idea of nested loops or converging ideas. Sometimes your trouble is actually composed of multiple, smaller problems that seem unrelated at first. A master storyteller will open a loop about a career failure, then open another loop about a relationship struggle, and finally bring them together at the climax to show how one massive realization solved both problems. This technique weaves a deeply rich, textured narrative that keeps the audience completely hypnotized. They are waiting to see how the different pieces of trouble will eventually connect. One of the most profoundly effective ways to amplify trouble and sustain tension is through the highly strategic use of silence. In the powerful world of public speaking and storytelling, the intentional pause is your absolute most powerful weapon. When you deliver your shocking hook, when you reveal the massive problem or the terrifying fact, you must stop speaking entirely. You must let the heavy words hang suspended in the air. Most people are absolutely terrified of silence. They feel an overwhelming, anxious need to fill every single empty second with rushing words. But when you rush past the trouble, you completely steal the emotional impact from your audience. If you say, "My company was on the absolutely verge of total bankruptcy," and then immediately start talking in a fast voice about your brilliant recovery plan, the audience simply does not have the necessary time to process the extreme danger. Instead, you must be bold. You must say, "We were exactly 48 hours away from total, irreversible bankruptcy." And then you wait. You hold steady eye contact with the room. You let the heavy silence stretch for 2, 3, maybe even 4 full seconds. In that pregnant silence, the tension in the room will completely skyrocket. The audience will physically feel the terrifying gravity of the situation. Their brains will be practically screaming for you to open your mouth and tell them what happened next. Only then, when the tension is at its absolute vibrating peak, do you continue your story. You are now heavily armed with the knowledge to command absolutely any room you walk into. You deeply understand that human attention is a fragile, incredibly expensive resource, and you know exactly, scientifically, how to capture it. You no longer need to rely on boring, long-winded introductions or completely useless setups. You have the ultimate power of the hook. I want to issue a serious challenge to you today. Closely examine the stories you naturally tell to your friends. Look critically at the professional emails you write. Analyze the presentations you give at work. Where exactly are you hiding the trouble? Where are you deeply burying the climax? Take a metaphorical red pen and aggressively cross out the useless fluff. Be bold enough, be brave enough to start right in the chaotic middle of the action. It will definitely feel deeply uncomfortable at first. It will feel exactly like you are breaking the polite, established rules of everyday conversation. But you must remember this absolute truth. Polite, traditional conversation is completely forgotten within 5 short minutes. Bold, authentic, tension-filled storytelling is remembered and cherished for an entire lifetime. Do not ever be afraid of your personal struggles. Do not hide the messy, complicated details of your life. The modern world does not need any more polished, fake, perfect robots reciting dry data. The world desperately needs real human beings who are fully willing to stand up, show their scars, and say, "Here is exactly where things went terribly wrong, and here is exactly what I learned from surviving it." Every single time you open your mouth to speak, you have a beautiful opportunity to spark a profound connection. You have a rare chance to pull someone out of their distracted, endless digital scrolling and bring them fully into a moment of shared, vibrant reality. You have the tools. You have the framework. You deeply understand the biology and the science of attention. Start with the trouble. Grab their wandering souls. Make them lean in close. Make them deeply care about your words. The stage is entirely yours, and the audience is desperately waiting. Chapter 3. The Pixar Framework. Welcome to the 3rd chapter of our journey. So far, we have explored the biological chemistry of human connection, and we have mastered the aggressive art of grabbing attention by starting with the trouble. You now know exactly how to hook your audience from the very first sentence, but a profound problem arises the moment after you deliver that brilliant hook. Once you have their absolute, undivided attention, what exactly do you do with it? How do you guide your listener through the rest of the narrative without losing them along the way? How do you prevent yourself from rambling, getting lost in useless details, or completely forgetting the point of your own message? The answer lies in one simple, incredibly powerful word: structure. Many people are terrified of the concept of structure. They believe that if they follow a formula, their stories will sound robotic, predictable, or unoriginal. They think true creativity means making everything up on the spot, letting the words flow in a chaotic, unstructured stream. This is a massive, fundamental misunderstanding of how the human brain processes information. The human brain deeply, desperately craves patterns. When you speak without a clear structure, your listener has to expend a massive amount of mental energy just trying to figure out where your story is going. Their brain becomes exhausted, they experience cognitive overload, and as a survival mechanism, they simply stop listening to you. When you provide a clear, familiar structure, you are actually giving the brain of your listener a massive gift. You are doing the heavy lifting for them. The structure acts as a safe, predictable container. Because the listener trusts the container, they can completely relax and absorb the beautiful, emotional content you are pouring into it. True creativity does not happen in a void of chaos. True creativity happens when you use a proven, reliable framework to express your unique human experience. In this chapter, we are going to explore the most successful, reliable, and universally loved narrative framework ever utilized in modern history. It is a framework that has generated billions of dollars in box office revenue, won countless Academy Awards, and captivated audiences of all ages across the entire globe. We are going to learn the closely guarded secrets of Pixar Animation Studios. To understand the immense power of this framework, we must first travel back in time to the year 1991. We are not going to a fancy Hollywood studio. We are going to a small, chaotic stage where a man named Ken Adams was teaching the difficult art of improvisational comedy. Improvisational comedy, or improv, is an incredibly terrifying art form. The actors stand on a stage with absolutely no script, no plan, and no safety net. They are given a random prompt from the audience, and they must instantly invent a compelling story entirely on the spot. As you can imagine, this often leads to complete disaster. Without a map, the actors would ramble, invent strange, disconnected events, and the scenes would eventually collapse into confusing, boring nonsense. Ken Adams realized that his students desperately needed a lifeline. They needed a simple, memorable skeleton that they could apply to absolutely any situation, no matter what crazy prompt the audience yelled out. So, Adams invented a brilliant, 8-step structural tool. He called it the story spine. It was a series of simple, fill-in-the-blank sentences that forced the improvisers to build a narrative with a clear beginning, a rising middle, and a satisfying end. By memorizing these 8 simple sentences, the actors could instantly construct a rock-solid story about anything, from a lonely astronaut to a talking dog. The story spine was a revolutionary tool for spontaneous theater. A few years later, a woman named Rebecca Stockley, who was deeply involved in the world of improvisational theater, learned about the story spine from Ken Adams. She eventually went to work at a tiny, innovative animation studio in California called Pixar. Stockley introduced the story spine to her colleagues in the story department. The creative minds at Pixar instantly recognized the absolute brilliance of this simple framework. They began using it to test their movie ideas, outline their complex scripts, and ensure that every single film they produced had a rock-solid emotional core. Fast forward to the year 2011. A talented storyboard artist at Pixar named Emma Coates decided to share some of the incredible knowledge she had gained while working at the studio. She took to the internet and published a list of 22 rules of storytelling. This list completely exploded across the creative world. Writers, directors, marketing executives, and public speakers eagerly devoured the wisdom. Right there on the list, categorized as Pixar storytelling rule number 4, was the exact 8-step story spine that Ken Adams had invented 20 years earlier. Pixar had adopted it, refined it, and used it as the foundational architecture for some of the greatest stories ever told. Now, let us break down this magical framework step by step. I am going to give you the exact 8 sentences. You must memorize these. You must practice them. They will become your ultimate safety net for any presentation, any speech, and any difficult conversation you ever have for the rest of your life. Sentence 1. Once upon a time there was blank. Sentence 2. Every day blank. Sentence 3. One day blank. Sentence 4. Because of that blank. Sentence 5. Because of that blank. Sentence 6. Because of that blank. Sentence 7. Until finally blank. Sentence 8. And ever since then blank. It looks incredibly simple, almost like a game for children. But do not let the simplicity fool you. Beneath these 8 short sentences lies the deepest, most powerful psychological structure of human transformation. Let us examine exactly why each specific step is critically important and how you can use them to craft unforgettable messages. The first sentence is, once upon a time there was blank. This is where you establish your protagonist and the setting of your world. In a self-help context or a business presentation, the protagonist might be you, it might be your company, or it might be your ideal customer. The key here is clarity. You must immediately ground the listener in a specific reality. If the audience does not know who the story is about or where it is taking place, they will feel lost and disconnected. You do not need to spend 20 minutes describing the color of the walls. You just need to provide a clear, simple anchor. The second sentence is, every day blank. This step is absolutely crucial, and it is the step that most amateur storytellers completely skip. This sentence establishes the routine. It shows the audience exactly what the normal, everyday world looked like before the massive trouble arrived. Why is the routine so important? Because the human brain relies entirely on contrast to understand the importance of an event. You cannot truly appreciate the brilliant light of the sun unless you have experienced the dark, cold night. You cannot understand the magnitude of a disaster unless you know how peaceful things were before the disaster happened. Imagine you want to tell a story about a massive, devastating financial collapse that changed your career. If you just start by saying you lost all your money, it is certainly a problem, but it lacks emotional depth. But if you spend just a moment establishing the routine, the impact is multiplied 100 times. You say, every single day I woke up, checked my massive bank account, bought an incredibly expensive coffee, and walked into my corner office believing I was completely invincible. I thought the money would absolutely never stop flowing. By establishing this arrogant, comfortable routine, you set the stage for a massive, painful fall. The routine gives the trouble a place to land. The third sentence is, one day blank. This is the inciting incident. This is the exact moment the comfortable routine is violently shattered. This is the spark that ignites the entire fire. In the previous chapter, we talked extensively about the concept of starting with the trouble to grab attention. This one-day moment is exactly where that trouble lives. This is the moment you got fired, the moment you received the terrifying medical diagnosis, or the moment your biggest client walked out the door. The one-day moment forces the protagonist out of their comfort zone and demands an immediate reaction. It destroys the old balance and thrusts the story into chaos. Now we enter the absolute core engine of the framework. Sentences 4, 5, and 6 are all identical because of that blank. This is the section where the majority of stories either succeed brilliantly or fail miserably. This section represents the rising action. It is the long, difficult journey of cause and effect. The protagonist tries to solve the massive problem created by the one-day moment. But every time they take an action, it causes a new, unexpected reaction. I need you to pay extremely close attention to the specific phrasing here. It is because of that, not and then. The difference between those two phrases is the difference between a master storyteller and a completely boring amateur. To truly understand this, we must briefly leave the halls of Pixar and look at the brilliant, unconventional minds of Trey Parker and Matt Stone, the creators of the wildly successful television show South Park. In a fascinating documentary that explored their intense writing process, Trey Parker and Matt Stone stood in front of a massive whiteboard filled with story beats. They explained a core rule that governs every single script they write. They call it the rule of replacing. They look closely at the transitions between every scene in their story. If they can comfortably place the words and then between two scenes, they immediately know the story is completely broken, boring, and dead. They will aggressively rewrite the entire sequence. Why is the phrase "and then" so dangerous? Because it completely destroys the concept of causality. It turns a story into a boring, disconnected list of arbitrary events. Imagine I tell you a story like this. I woke up this morning, and then I ate a piece of toast, and then I went to the store, and then I bought a blue shirt, and then I drove back home. Your brain is begging me to stop talking. There is no tension. There is no conflict. The events have absolutely no relationship to each other. The toast did not cause the trip to the store. The trip to the store did not cause the purchase of the shirt. It is just a flat, monotonous timeline. Trey Parker and Matt Stone mandate that you must replace every single, and then with the words "but" or "therefore." This concept was later adapted by a scientist-turned-filmmaker named Randy Olson into the highly effective "and, but, therefore" framework, known as the ABT method, which is now used globally to help scientists communicate complex data to the public. When you use "but," you introduce a massive conflict or a sudden obstacle. When you use "therefore" or "because of that," you introduce a direct, logical consequence. This creates a tight, unbreakable chain of cause and effect. Every single action directly forces the next action to happen. Let us rewrite the boring story using this powerful causal logic. I woke up this morning perfectly happy, but I suddenly realized I was an hour late for the most important job interview of my life. Therefore I panicked, grabbed a piece of toast and sprinted out the door. But I was running so fast that I tripped and spilled hot coffee entirely down my white shirt. Therefore, I had to completely detour to a clothing store to desperately buy a new blue shirt before the interview. Do you feel the incredible pulsing difference? The second version is a thrilling roller coaster of tension and consequence. The lateness caused the panic. The panic caused the running. The running caused the spill. The spill caused the detour. The audience is completely locked in because the narrative momentum is constantly pushing forward. This is exactly why the middle section of the Pixar story spine repeats the phrase "because of that" 3 times. It trains your brain to ensure that every event is deeply connected to the event that happened right before it. When you outline your own messages, you must be ruthless with your transitions. Look at the bullet points of your presentation. Are you just listing separate, disconnected facts? Are you saying our product is fast, and then it is also cheap, and then it is also easy to use? That is not a story. That is a boring brochure. You must find the causal link. You must say, our customers were deeply frustrated by how slow their old software was. Because of that, they were losing massive amounts of money. Because of that, we engineered a completely new, incredibly fast software platform to solve their exact pain, cause and effect. That is the engine of human interest. Let us return to the story spine. After you have built your rising action with the "because of that" chain, you reach sentence 7. Until finally blank. This is the climax. This is the absolute peak of the mountain. All of the tension, all of the mistakes, and all of the chaotic consequences from the middle of the story crash together into one final decisive moment. The protagonist must face their deepest fear, confront the ultimate problem, and make a massive, difficult choice. The tension is finally released. The eighth and final sentence is, and ever since then blank. This is the resolution. This is where you establish the new normal. The protagonist cannot simply return to the exact same life they lived in the everyday phase. If they return to the exact same life, the entire story was completely pointless. A story is essentially a machine designed to create human change. The protagonist must learn a profound lesson, adopt a new perspective, or gain a new skill. The and ever since then phase is where you clearly deliver the moral, the takeaway, or the ultimate value of your message to the audience. To prove how universally flawless this structure is, let us apply it to one of the most famous and successful stories of our modern era. Let us look at the massive cultural phenomenon, the movie The Matrix, and run it directly through the 8 steps of the Ken Adams story spine. Once upon a time, there was a depressed, lonely computer hacker named Thomas Anderson, who went by the online alias Neo. Every day he worked a deeply boring corporate software job, feeling an agonizing, constant sense that something was fundamentally wrong with the world. One day he was contacted by a mysterious rebel named Morpheus, who offered him a red pill that would completely wake him up to the horrifying truth. Because of that, Neo swallowed the pill, woke up in a pod of pink slime, and realized that his entire reality was a fake computer simulation controlled by evil machines. Because of that, Neo was rescued by the rebels and had to undergo brutal, intense training to learn how to bend the rules of the simulated world. Because of that, Neo drew the attention of the deadly, unstoppable agent programs, leading to a massive betrayal by one of his own crew members. Until finally, Neo stopped running from the agents, stood his ground in a dark hallway, fully realized his incredible power as the Chosen One, and completely destroyed the lead agent from the inside out. And ever since then, Neo stopped being a victim of the simulation and became a powerful savior, ready to free the rest of humanity from their digital prison. The entire 2-hour movie, with all its complex philosophy, slow-motion bullet dodging, and intricate characters, is perfectly held together by these simple 8 sentences. The spine is the invisible skeleton that keeps the massive body of the story standing upright. Now, let us examine another absolutely crucial rule from Emma Coates and her list of Pixar wisdom. Rule number 1 is perhaps the most profound piece of psychological advice you will ever receive regarding storytelling. Rule number 1 states, you admire a character for trying more than for their successes. I need you to let that sink deeply into your mind. You admire a character for trying more than for their successes. We live in a society that is completely obsessed with winning. We celebrate the gold medals, the massive bank accounts, and the flawless, heavily edited pictures on social media. Because of this societal pressure, most people believe that when they stand up to tell a story, they must present themselves as absolute, untouchable winners. They boast about their massive sales numbers. They brag about their perfect relationships. They talk endlessly about how smart, capable, and successful they are. This approach is absolute poison to an audience. When you brag about your flawless successes, the audience does not admire you. They actually resent you. They feel alienated. They look at your perfect life, and then look at their own messy, complicated, troubled lives, and they feel a massive, unbridgeable disconnect. They tune you out. Pixar deeply understands that human connection is not built on a foundation of perfection. Human connection is built on a foundation of desperate, messy, relentless effort. Think about the movie Finding Nemo. Marlin the clownfish is not a brave, powerful, successful warrior. He is a terrified, neurotic, deeply flawed little fish who is afraid of his own shadow. We do not love Marlin because he is perfect. We love Marlin because he is absolutely terrified, but he continuously throws himself into terrifying situations anyway, just to save his son. We admire him purely for the immense, painful effort of his trying. When you use the story spine to craft your own personal narratives, you must lean heavily into the struggle. During the because of that section of your story, you must allow your audience to see you fail. You must tell them about the strategies you tried that completely backfired. You must tell them about the nights you laid awake staring at the ceiling, feeling totally incompetent and ready to quit. Imagine you are leading a team of employees who are facing a massive, seemingly impossible project. Morale is incredibly low. If you walk into the room and give a speech about how you successfully completed a similar project 10 years ago with zero problems, your team will roll their eyes. They will think you're entirely out of touch with their current painful reality. But imagine you use Pixar rule number 1. You walk into the room and say, 10 years ago, I was exactly where you are sitting right now. We had a massive deadline, and we were completely failing. Because of that, we tried to outsource the work, and the contractor completely scammed us. Because of that, we lost half our budget, and I personally had to call the client and beg for an extension while crying in my car in the parking lot. Because of that, we had to lock ourselves in a small room for 3 straight days, eating stale pizza and writing code until our fingers bled. Until finally, at the absolute last minute, we found a bizarre workaround that somehow saved the entire project. In this second version, you are completely exposing your massive failures. You are highlighting the messy, agonizing effort. And because you are highlighting the effort, your team will absolutely run through a brick wall for you. They see your shared humanity. They admire your relentless trying. The effort is the bridge that connects your heart to theirs. Let us look at another brilliant piece of wisdom from Emma Coates. Pixar rule number 7 states, come up with your ending before you figure out your middle. Seriously, endings are hard. Get yours working up front. This is incredibly practical advice for anyone trying to construct a message using the story spine. Many people make the massive mistake of starting their story without knowing exactly where it is going to end. They get an exciting idea for a hook, they drop the audience into the trouble, and then they just start rambling, hoping they will eventually stumble across a profound conclusion. This almost never works. If you do not know your final destination, you are just driving a car completely blindfolded. You will take useless detours, you will confuse your passengers, and you will eventually run out of gas in the middle of nowhere. Before you ever write the words "once upon a time," you must determine exactly what your and ever since then is going to be. You must define the ultimate value of your message. Ask yourself a very simple question. What is the one specific feeling, action, or lesson I want my audience to walk away with when I finish speaking? If your goal is to inspire your audience to stop procrastinating and chase their dreams, that is your ending. That is your true north on the compass. Once you have firmly locked in that destination, you can work backward. You can find the specific one-day moment in your own life that ultimately taught you that profound lesson. Knowing your ending guarantees that every single, because of that sequence in your middle section, has a meaningful, necessary purpose. Everything points aggressively toward the final resolution. It eliminates the useless fluff and keeps your narrative incredibly tight and powerful. Now, let us put all of this incredible theory into deep, practical action. I'm going to walk you through a highly detailed hypothetical scenario to show you exactly how to outline a compelling presentation from total scratch using everything we have learned in this chapter. Imagine you are a passionate local citizen. You have noticed that the children in your neighborhood have nowhere safe to play after school. They are playing in dangerous streets and abandoned parking lots. You decide to attend a city council meeting to demand funding for a brand new, safe community park. You only have 5 minutes to speak. How do you convince a room full of bored, tired politicians to give you a massive amount of money? If you walk in and just start reciting crime statistics and presenting budget spreadsheets, they will completely ignore you. you must use the story spine. First, we apply rule number 7. We start at the end. What is the ultimate goal? The and ever since then is that the City Council approves the funding, the park is built, and the children have a beautiful, safe environment that dramatically lowers the local crime rate. Now that we know our exact destination, we can build the emotional journey to get there. We begin with the baseline. Once upon a time, the west side of our city was a thriving, close-knit community full of growing families. Every day, hard-working parents would go to their jobs, trusting that their children could safely play in the empty lots behind the local school. Now we introduce the massive trouble, the inciting incident. One day, the city sold those empty lots to a massive commercial developer who instantly fenced off the entire area and left the neighborhood completely without a single recreational space. Now we engage the absolute power of the causal engine. We build the tension. We show the painful consequences. Because of that, dozens of energetic, frustrated children were suddenly forced to play their games directly in the busy, dangerous intersections of our neighborhood. Because of that, the number of near-miss traffic accidents involving small children skyrocketed, leaving parents in a state of absolute, constant terror. Because of that, the older teenagers, with absolutely nowhere to go and nothing productive to do, began gathering in dark alleys, leading to a massive spike in petty vandalism and local tension. Now we deliver the climax, the absolute peak of the mountain. We introduce the turning point. Until finally, last Tuesday afternoon, a 7-year-old boy named Leo was chasing a loose ball and was nearly struck by a speeding delivery truck, missing a horrible tragedy by mere inches, which forced our entire community to realize that we cannot survive another single week under these dangerous conditions. Now we deliver the resolution, the call to action, the new normal. And ever since that terrifying afternoon, we have organized this massive coalition standing before you today, demanding that you vote yes on the community funding bill, so that we can turn the abandoned lot on 5th Street into a beautiful, secure park, ensuring that our children never have to risk their lives just to play a simple game of catch again. Look at the immense, undeniable power of that short presentation. In less than 2 minutes of speaking, you have completely dismantled the boredom of the City Council. You have painted a vivid picture of a peaceful past. You have introduced a villain in the form of a careless developer. You have built an undeniable chain of dangerous consequences using the strict rule of cause and effect. You have highlighted the desperate effort and the terrifying stakes. You have provided a clear, emotional climax, and you have offered a perfect, logical resolution. You did not need complicated rhetoric. You did not need fancy, confusing vocabulary. You just needed the pure, elegant simplicity of the story spine. This framework is not a restrictive cage. It is a brilliant, aerodynamic skeleton that allows your creativity to fly incredibly high. The rigid structure of the spine actually frees your mind. Because you no longer have to constantly panic and wonder what event comes next, you can dedicate all of your valuable mental energy to painting beautiful sensory details, expressing raw vulnerability, and connecting deeply with the eyes of your audience. I strongly encourage you to completely integrate this tool into your daily life. The next time you are sitting at a dinner table and want to tell a story about a funny thing that happened at the grocery store, quietly run it through the spine in your head before you speak. Identify the routine, pinpoint the inciting incident, string together the chain of consequences using the word therefore, and land firmly on a clear resolution. The more you practice this simple exercise, the faster it will become a deep, subconscious reflex. You will eventually start seeing the beautiful matrix of story structure everywhere you look. You will hear it in the songs on the radio, you will see it in the structure of brilliant television commercials, and you will recognize it in the speeches of the most powerful leaders in the world. There is immense comfort in knowing that the greatest communicators in human history do not possess a magical, unattainable gift. They are simply using a set of highly reliable, thoroughly tested tools. They understand that to move the human heart, you must honor the fundamental way the human brain receives information. You possess a beautiful, totally unique perspective on the world. You have survived massive trials. You have learned painful lessons, and you have experienced moments of profound joy. Those experiences are incredibly valuable, but they will remain locked inside you forever if you do not know how to properly package them for others to consume. The Pixar framework is your ultimate packaging tool. It is the brilliant, simple box that safely delivers your profound truth to the waiting hands of the world. Trust the structure. Embrace the simple sentence starters. Let the undeniable logic of cause and effect drive your narrative powerfully forward. Do not ever be afraid to show your messy, complicated effort, because that effort is exactly what makes you a relatable, lovable human being. Always know your ultimate destination before you take your very first step. You are entirely capable of becoming an unforgettable storyteller. The tools are now firmly in your hands. In the next chapter, we are going to dive even deeper into the emotional execution of these stories. We are going to explore exactly how to breathe vibrant, pulsing life into the characters within your narrative. We will learn how to move beyond vague concepts and paint highly vivid, unforgettable pictures in the minds of your listeners. We will master the beautiful art of showing rather than telling. Chapter 4. Put a face on it. Welcome to the fourth chapter of our journey. We have covered an incredible amount of ground so far. In our first chapter, we explored the deep, biological chemistry of human connection, learning how hormones like oxytocin and dopamine physically change the brain of your listener. In our second chapter, we mastered the aggressive art of the hook, learning how to grab expensive human attention by starting directly with the trouble. In our third chapter, we discovered the elegant, universally powerful structure of the Pixar framework, ensuring that every narrative you share has a rock-solid skeleton of cause and effect. You now possess a brilliant, scientifically backed architecture for your messages. You have the perfect skeleton. But a skeleton by itself is not beautiful. A skeleton is cold, rigid, and clinical. If you place a perfect bare skeleton on a brightly lit stage, nobody in the audience is going to cry. Nobody is going to feel deeply inspired. Nobody is going to run out of the room feeling motivated to change the world. To make an audience truly care, to make them feel something so profound that it alters their behavior, you must take that strong, logical skeleton and wrap it in warm, breathing, human flesh. You must give it a face. This chapter is entirely dedicated to the beautiful, delicate art of emotional resonance. We are going to explore exactly how to move your stories out of the cold realm of abstract logic and drop them directly into the warm, pulsing heart of human experience. We will master the fundamental difference between telling an audience what happened and showing an audience how it physically felt. Let us start by addressing a massive, widespread problem in the modern professional world. From a very young age, particularly in our educational and corporate systems, we are heavily trained to be objective. We are taught that emotions are messy and unprofessional. We are instructed to use large numbers, massive statistics, and broad, sweeping concepts to prove our points. We deeply believe that if we just provide enough data points on a colorful chart, people will logically agree with us and change their minds. This belief is fundamentally flawed. It is a complete misunderstanding of human psychology. Abstract concepts and massive numbers do not move the human heart. they actually paralyze it. There is a profoundly powerful quote attributed to Mother Teresa that perfectly captures this concept. She reportedly said, "If I look at the mass, I will never act. If I look at the one, I will." This simple sentence is the absolute ultimate secret to effective storytelling. To understand the deep science behind this quote, we must look at the groundbreaking psychological research conducted by Dr. Paul Slovic and his colleagues at the University of Oregon. Dr. Slovic has spent decades studying a deeply fascinating psychological phenomenon known as the identifiable victim effect, which is closely related to a concept called psychic numbing or scope neglect. Dr. Slovic wanted to understand why human beings will empty their bank accounts to save one single-stranded dog, but completely ignore a massive famine that is starving millions of people on the other side of the planet. He conducted a brilliant, famous experiment in partnership with the charity organization Save the Children. The researchers divided potential donors into different groups. The first group was given a highly factual statistical appeal. They were told that massive food shortages in Africa were affecting millions of children. They were given the exact numbers of people facing severe starvation and widespread disease. After reading this overwhelming data-heavy presentation, the average person in this group donated exactly $1.14. The second group was given an entirely different presentation. They received absolutely no statistics, no massive numbers, no broad context. Instead, they were shown a picture of one single identifiable little girl. They were told her name. They were told she was facing severe hunger. They were told that their specific individual donation would personally change her life. The average person in this second group donated $2.38. That is more than double the amount donated by the group who received the massive statistics. But Dr. Slovic did not stop there. He wanted to see what would happen if he combined the two strategies. The researchers assumed that if they gave a third group the emotional story of the single little girl and then added the massive statistics to show the massive scale of the problem, the donations would skyrocket. They were completely wrong. When they combined the emotional story of the single girl with the massive statistics of the millions suffering, the average donation drastically dropped down to $1.43. This is an absolutely mind-blowing revelation. Adding facts and data to a human story actually destroyed the emotional connection and suppressed the generosity of the audience. Why does this happen? Dr. Slovic calls it the drop-in-the-bucket effect. When you introduce massive numbers, the human brain simply cannot process the scale. We did not evolve to understand the concept of millions. For thousands of years, our ancient ancestors lived in small tribes of maybe 100 people. Our brains are deeply wired to care intensely about the individual faces within our small tribe. When you tell a person that one single child is starving, their brain immediately recognizes a human face in distress, and their empathy hormones flood their system. They feel a desperate urge to help. But when you tell that same person that millions of people are starving, their brain completely short-circuits. They cannot mentally picture a million faces. The problem feels impossibly large. Their subconscious mind immediately concludes that their tiny donation will not make any real difference. Their contribution is just a useless drop in an infinite bucket. Because they feel entirely helpless to solve the massive problem, their brain employs a defense mechanism called psychic numbing. It completely shuts off the emotional response, so the person does not have to feel the crushing weight of the massive tragedy. Another incredible study perfectly illustrates this exact same cognitive bias, which researchers call scope neglect. In this study, people were asked how much money they would be willing to donate to save migratory birds from drowning in toxic oil ponds. The researchers divided the people into three separate groups. The first group was asked how much they would pay to save 2,000 birds. The second group was asked how much they would pay to save 20,000 birds. The third group was asked how much they would pay to save 200,000 birds. Logic dictates that people should be willing to pay significantly more money to save 200,000 birds than to save 2,000 birds. But human beings are not logical creatures. The first group offered an average of $80 to save 2,000 birds. The second group offered an average of $78 to save 20,000 birds. The third group offered an average of $88 to save 200,000 birds. The numbers are virtually identical. In fact, people were actually willing to pay slightly less to save 20,000 birds than they were to save 2,000. The renowned psychologist Daniel Kahneman explained that this happens because the participants are not actually calculating the value of the birds. Instead, their brain is instantly generating a mental image of one single exhausted, terrified bird covered in thick black oil. Their emotional response and their wallet is entirely attached to that one single imagined face. The massive numbers simply do not register in the emotional center of the brain. This brings us to a highly actionable, critical lesson for your own communication. Whether you are leading a massive corporation, managing a small team, or raising money for a local charity, you must actively fight the urge to talk about massive scale. You must stop trying to tell the story of your entire company. You must stop trying to save the entire world in one speech. If you want people to care, you must ruthlessly zoom in. You must isolate one single human being. If you want to explain how your new software improves productivity, do not show a chart representing 10,000 anonymous users. Tell the deep, detailed story of one specific user named Sarah. Describe the exact dark circles under her tired eyes before she found your product. Describe the massive relief she felt when she finally got to leave the office early and see her children. Put a face on your data. Make the abstract completely tangible. Now that we deeply understand the profound necessity of humanizing our message, we must learn the mechanical skills to actually do it. We must master the most famous, most frequently repeated golden rule in all of creative writing. Show. Do not tell. Every single author, screenwriter, and public speaker has heard this advice. But very few people actually understand what it means in practical, everyday execution. The difference between telling and showing is the exact difference between reading a boring recipe and eating a delicious meal. Telling relies heavily on emotional label words. These are words like angry, sad, happy, nervous, frustrated, and excited. These label words are completely dead. They are abstract summaries. When you say, "I was extremely nervous," you are simply delivering a clinical diagnosis of your mental state. You are expecting the audience to do the heavy lifting of imagining what nervousness feels like. Showing relies entirely on the physical manifestations of emotion. Emotions do not exist in a vacuum. They are deeply physical, biological events that alter the human body. When you show, you completely ban the emotional label words from your vocabulary. Instead, you describe exactly what the emotion is doing to your physical form or the physical environment around you. Let us practice this with a highly relatable example. Imagine you are telling a story about a massive, terrifying presentation you had to give to the board of directors early in your career. The telling version sounds like this. I was standing backstage, waiting for my name to be called. I was extremely nervous. I was terrified I was going to fail and lose my job. That is incredibly boring. It conveys information, but it transfers absolutely zero feeling. Now let us apply the principle of showing. We will completely remove the words nervous and terrified. The showing version sounds like this. I was standing in the dark hallway just off the main stage. The silence in the massive auditorium was totally suffocating. My mouth tasted like dry, bitter copper. My throat felt like it was thickly coated in coarse sand. I realized that my hands were violently shaking, so I had to physically press them flat against the cold brick wall just to stop the trembling. I stared at the heavy wooden door leading to the stage, completely convinced my racing heart was going to crack my ribs. Do you feel the massive, undeniable difference? In the second version, the listener does not just understand that you were nervous. They literally feel the heavy anxiety building in their own chest. They taste the dry copper. They feel the cold brick wall against their shaking hands. You have successfully bypassed their logical filter and directly hijacked their biological empathy system. To master this incredible skill, I want you to practice a specific exercise called the emotion translation. Whenever you are writing a speech, an email, or preparing a presentation, scan your text for any emotional label words. When you find a word like frustrated, draw a heavy line completely through it. Then, force yourself to write 3 physical things that happen to a human body when experiencing deep frustration. Do you clench your jaw until your teeth ache? Do you pace the floor aggressively? Do you aggressively rub the bridge of your nose? Take those physical actions and insert them directly into your story. You are translating the abstract label into a vivid, physical reality. This beautiful concept of showing over telling leads us directly into the incredible realm of sensory language. We are now going to explore some deeply fascinating neuroscience that proves exactly why descriptive sensory words are the most powerful tools in your entire communication arsenal. This is not just poetic advice from a literature teacher. This is hard, measurable science. Researchers Dr. Krish Sathian at Emory University and Dr. Vicky Lai at the University of Arizona have conducted extensive, groundbreaking studies on how the human brain processes metaphorical and sensory language. They used highly advanced functional magnetic resonance imaging machines, known as fMRI, and electroencephalogram technology, known as EEG, to literally map the electrical and chemical activity inside the brains of human subjects. The results of their studies fundamentally change everything we know about human communication. They discovered that when you use words related to the 5 physical senses, you do not just activate the language processing centers of the brain of your listener, you literally activate the sensory regions of their cerebral cortex. For example, Dr. Sathian discovered that when a person hears a textural metaphor, like saying someone had a rough day or a situation was extremely smooth, a very specific region of the brain called the parietal operculum lights up with intense blood flow. The parietal operculum is the exact somatosensory cortex responsible for processing actual physical touch and texture. This means that when you say the word rough, the brain of your listener physically simulates the sensation of dragging their fingers across abrasive sandpaper. Furthermore, when researchers tested metaphors related to the human body, such as saying someone twisted my arm or I had to shoulder the massive responsibility, a region called the extrastriate body area lit up significantly. This is the exact part of the brain that governs the visual perception of human limbs. When they tested action-oriented metaphors, such as saying I finally grasped the complex concept, the actual motor cortex of the listener activated. Their brain was literally planning the physical muscle movements required to reach out and grab a physical object. This profound scientific reality is known as grounded cognition. It proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that human comprehension is deeply perceptually grounded in our physical bodily experiences. Think about the massive, incredible power this gives you as a storyteller. When you use rich, specific sensory language, you are not just painting a pretty picture. You are actively hacking the biological hardware of your audience. You are forcing their brains to physically relive your exact experiences. If you want your audience to deeply feel the harsh reality of a failure, do not just tell them it was a bad experience. Use sensory anchors. Describe the heavy, suffocating smell of stale coffee in the boardroom after the massive deal fell apart. Describe the deafening, awful silence when the client hung up the phone. Describe the harsh, blinding glare of the fluorescent lights reflecting off the empty desk. Smell is particularly powerful. It is the oldest sense in our evolutionary history, and it is directly wired into the limbic system, which is the emotional and memory center of the brain. A single description of a specific smell can instantly transport a listener across decades of time. Describe the sharp, metallic smell of rain hitting hot asphalt. Describe the sweet, dusty smell of an old library book. Describe the bitter, burnt smell of a ruined dinner. When you activate the olfactory bulb in the brain of your listener through the clever use of words, you lock their attention onto your story with an unbreakable biological chain. To make this highly practical, you must audit your own communication. Before you deliver a message, ask yourself a very simple question. Have I included at least 3 of the 5 senses in this narrative? Have I given the audience something specific to look at, something distinct to listen to, and something physical to touch? If your story exists completely in a blank, white, silent void, you are failing to engage the biological machinery of your listener. Ground your story in the messy, loud, fragrant, textured reality of the physical world. Another absolutely crucial element of putting a human face on your story is giving your characters true agency. One of the most common mistakes amateur storytellers make is filling their narratives with passive characters. A passive character is someone who simply stands around while things happen to them. They have no opinions. They have no reactions. They are just empty vessels floating down the river of the plot. Human beings are not passive vessels. We are intensely reactive. We have loud opinions, deep prejudices, and sudden, unexpected impulses. If you want your audience to care about the people in your stories, including yourself, you must show them reacting dynamically to the world around them. You accomplish this by clearly displaying their active choices and their distinct opinions. When the massive trouble arrives in your story, how exactly does the character react? Do they freeze in total panic? Do they instantly start yelling and blaming everyone else? Do they quietly retreat into a corner and start taking frantic, meticulous notes? These specific active reactions are exactly what reveal the true nature and personality of the character. The absolute best tool for revealing character personality and bringing your story to vibrant life is the strategic use of direct dialogue. Many people make the massive error of summarizing conversations instead of quoting them directly. Summarizing a conversation is a form of telling. Quoting a conversation is a powerful form of showing. Let us look at a distinct example of this crucial difference. Imagine you are telling a story about a horrible manager who completely lacked empathy. The summarizing version sounds like this. I went into the office of my manager to tell him that my car had broken down and I was going to be late. He was extremely rude to me and told me he did not care about my personal problems and that I needed to focus entirely on my work. This version is incredibly dry. It forces you to use the label word rude to describe the manager. It tells the audience what to think rather than letting them experience the horrible behavior for themselves. Now, let us use direct dialogue to show the exact same scene. I knocked gently on the heavy glass door and stepped into his office. He did not even look up from his glowing computer screen. I nervously explained that my engine had completely died on the highway. He kept typing aggressively on his keyboard for 3 long seconds. Finally, without ever making eye contact, he pointed a silver pen directly at the door and said, "Your transportation issues are absolutely not my problem. If you cannot manage a simple commute, perhaps we need to find someone who can. Now close my door on your way out." Do you see the immense, undeniable power of direct dialogue? In the second version, you never have to use the word rude. The audience instantly knows exactly who this horrible man is. The dialogue reveals his complete arrogance, his coldness, and the massive power dynamic in the room. The audience instantly hates him, and they instantly feel deep sympathy for you. Direct dialogue acts as a flawless mirror, perfectly reflecting the soul of the speaker. Whenever you are recounting an interaction with another human being, strive to remember the exact specific words they used. Do not paraphrase. Let their unique voice, their specific vocabulary, and their distinct tone ring clearly through your narrative. It breathes pulsing life into the memory and makes the audience feel like invisible witnesses standing right there in the room with you. Let us combine everything we have learned in this chapter into a highly actionable 4-step framework that you can use daily. We will call this the humanizing process. You can apply this simple process to absolutely any piece of communication, transforming it from a boring block of abstract data into a deeply compelling, resonant human experience. Step 1. Isolate the human anchor. Look closely at the broad message you are trying to deliver. Identify the massive statistics or the abstract concepts. Now, aggressively push them aside and find the one single human being who perfectly represents the core of that message. If you are talking about the massive impact of a new healthcare policy, find the one single patient whose life was directly saved by it. If you are talking about the devastating effects of economic inflation, find the one specific family struggling to buy groceries. You must ground your massive idea in one single identifiable face to combat the powerful force of psychic numbing. Step 2. Ban the emotional labels. Review your narrative and hunt down every single summary word. Eliminate the words angry, sad, joyful, stressed, and relieved. Draw a thick red line through them. Force yourself to replace those empty labels with the exact physical behaviors that demonstrate the emotion. Show the clenched fists, show the pacing, show the exhausted slumping of the shoulders. Let the body language do the heavy lifting of communication. Step 3. Inject the sensory anchor. Bring the physical environment to vibrant life by engaging at least 3 of the 5 biological senses. What was the exact temperature of the room? What specific sounds were echoing in the background? What did the air smell like? Hack the sensory cortex of your listener by using rich, textural, and highly descriptive metaphors. Make the abstract world deeply, physically real. Step 4. Add the active dialogue. Give your characters a strong, distinct voice. Do not summarize their interactions. Let them speak directly to each other. Use their exact words to reveal their deep fears, their hidden arrogance, or their quiet courage. Let the audience hear the exact tone of the conversation so they can form their own powerful opinions about the people involved. Let us walk through a highly practical, real-world example of the humanizing process in action. Imagine you are a middle manager at a large tech company. It is the end of the 3rd quarter, and you have to present the latest sales figures to the executive board. Your software product helps small retail businesses manage their massive inventory. The raw data shows that your new software update reduced inventory errors by 30% across 5,000 users. Most managers would simply project a massive line graph on the wall, point to the 30% increase, and read a boring list of technical features. The executives would stare blankly at the screen, their brains completely numbed by the abstract numbers. They would forget the presentation 5 minutes after leaving the room. But you are a master storyteller. You are going to use the humanizing process to completely captivate the room. First, you step away from the massive screen. You look directly at the executives. You do not mention the 30% increase. You do not mention the 5,000 users. Instead, you say, "I want to tell you about a man named Marcus." You have isolated the human anchor. The executives lean in slightly. You continue. "Marcus owns a small independent hardware store in the north end of the city. His father opened the store 40 years ago. Last December, before he found our new software, Marcus was drowning. He was trying to track thousands of tiny bolts, screws, and tools using a massive, disorganized paper ledger. Every single night, long after the store closed, he would sit on the cold concrete floor of his freezing back room, entirely surrounded by towering boxes of uncounted inventory. You have banned the emotional labels and injected the sensory anchors. You did not say Marcus was stressed. You showed him sitting on a cold concrete floor surrounded by towering boxes. The executives can literally feel the freezing room and the crushing weight of the disorganization. You continue. I visited his store last November. He looked completely exhausted. His eyes were heavily bloodshot, and his hands were stained black with ink and dirt. He looked down at the massive pile of paper and said, "My father built this place with his bare hands, but I'm losing so much money on missing inventory that I'm going to have to lock the doors forever by Christmas. I just cannot keep track of it all anymore." You have used active dialogue. You did not summarize his fear. You quoted his exact, painful words. The executives now deeply care about Marcus and his legacy. Finally, you deliver the resolution. But then we installed our new automated inventory update. I went back to visit Marcus last week. The massive paper ledger was completely gone. He was standing near the front window, drinking a hot cup of coffee and watching the morning traffic. He smiled, shook my hand, and said, for the first time in 5 years, I actually slept through the entire night, knowing the system was tracking every single item perfectly. That is exactly what our new 30% reduction in inventory errors looks like in the real world. We are not just fixing data. We are giving people their lives back. The entire boardroom will be utterly silent. You have completely bypassed their logical resistance. You have wrapped your abstract data in a profoundly resonant, breathing human story. They will never forget the story of Marcus, and because they will never forget Marcus, they will never forget the incredible value of your software. This is the ultimate, magnificent power of putting a face on your message. It is the profound realization that at the end of the day, human beings only truly care about other human beings. We do not care about spreadsheets. We do not care about corporate buzzwords. We do not care about abstract theories. We care about struggle. We care about survival. We care about the messy, beautiful, textured reality of the shared human experience. As you move forward and continue to build your stories, I want you to embrace your own humanity completely. Do not hide behind a fake wall of perfect professionalism. Do not try to sound like a flawless, emotionless robot. The world already has enough robots. The world is absolutely starving for deep, authentic human connection. Be brave enough to describe the cold sweat on your palms. Be bold enough to share the exact, terrifying words someone said to you. Paint vivid pictures with your sensory language. Let your listeners smell the rain, taste the bitter coffee, and feel the rough texture of your massive struggles. When you fully commit to the humanizing process, you elevate yourself from a simple speaker to a profound connector. You give your audience the ultimate gift. You give them the ability to step outside of their own busy minds and walk a mile inside your shoes. You prove to them that they are not alone in their fears, their frustrations, or their ultimate triumphs. Your unique face, your unique voice, and your specific sensory memories are the most powerful communication tools you will ever possess. Do not ever minimize them. Do not ever hide them behind massive, numbing statistics. Bring them directly into the light. Put a human face on everything you do and watch exactly how deeply the world responds to your truth. This concludes our deep exploration of emotional resonance and sensory language. You now have the skeleton and you have the pulsing human flesh. But there is one final, incredibly difficult challenge that every storyteller must eventually face. You have grabbed their attention, you have structured the journey, and you have made them feel deeply. Now, you must figure out how to safely bring them back down to earth. You must learn the delicate, lasting art of the perfect ending. In the next chapter, we will master the resolution, and we will ensure that your final words echo in the minds of your audience long after you have finished speaking. Chapter 5. Landing the Plane. Welcome to the fifth and final chapter of our journey. We have covered an incredible amount of ground together. We started by looking deep inside the human brain to understand the biological chemistry of trust and attention. We learned how to grab an audience by the collar by starting our stories directly in the middle of the trouble. We studied the absolute brilliance of the Pixar framework, learning how to build a rock-solid skeleton of cause and effect. In our previous chapter, we mastered the art of putting a human face on our data, using rich sensory language and direct dialogue to make our listeners physically feel our experiences. You now have a powerful engine. You know how to take off, and you know how to navigate the turbulent skies of the middle of the story. But none of that matters if you do not know how to safely land the plane. Endings are notoriously difficult. Many people simply do not know how to wrap up their thoughts gracefully. They either crash the plane abruptly or they circle the runway forever until the audience begs for it to stop. This chapter is completely dedicated to the delicate, lasting art of the perfect resolution. We are going to learn how to deliver an ending that echoes in the minds of your audience long after you have left the room. Grasping why the conclusion is the single most vital element of your whole speech requires examining an intriguing psychological phenomenon called the peak-end rule. Identified and extensively studied by Nobel laureate psychologist Daniel Kahneman, this principle fundamentally shatters our rational assumptions regarding human memory. It makes rational sense to think that when someone recalls an event, their mind computes a mathematical average of every passing second. You might guess that a 10-minute speech is evaluated by combining all 10 minutes to find a median rating, but Dr. Kahneman demonstrated this is entirely incorrect. Our minds do not retain the average feeling of an event. Rather, they recall just two distinct points, the peak being the highest point of emotional intensity and the precise manner in which the event concluded. Almost every other detail, including the overall length of the event, fades away, a cognitive blind spot commonly referred to as duration neglect. To demonstrate this principle, Dr. Kahneman and his researchers ran an ingenious but highly unpleasant clinical trial focusing on patients enduring a painful medical examination. The subjects were split into two distinct cohorts, with the first undergoing a brief, agonizing procedure that terminated suddenly at the height of their discomfort. The second cohort went through that identical agonizing procedure, except the physicians deliberately prolonged it for several minutes, gradually tapering off the pain before ceasing. From a logical standpoint, the second cohort endured more overall suffering due to the extended time, yet when asked to evaluate their recollection of the event, the findings were astonishing. Individuals in the first cohort, despite the shorter duration, recalled the event as a terrifying and profoundly traumatic ordeal, whereas those in the second cohort, who endured more minutes of pain but had a softer finish, recalled it as far less severe. Actually, a vast majority of subjects explicitly favored the lengthier procedure purely because its conclusion was milder, leading Dr. Kahneman to deduce that we do not truly choose between experiences themselves. Instead, we choose between our memories of those events, meaning a marginally improved conclusion can entirely overwrite the recollection of a painful ordeal. Consider the enormous, game-changing impact this holds for your public addresses, everyday chats, and corporate pitches, where you might present 10 minutes of dull, convoluted statistics. Your listeners might be entirely disengaged. Yet if you provide a remarkably compelling, emotional, and fulfilling last minute, this rule guarantees your crowd will leave the room recalling the whole speech as a spectacular success. Their minds will throw away the tedious middle section and strongly attach to the wonderful conclusion, while on the flip side, you might give 20 minutes of the most spectacular, captivating narrative imaginable. However, if you trip over your closing words, mumble uneasily, and clumsily exit the platform, the whole memory is shattered as a poor finish corrupts a wonderful journey. This psychological principle confirms that your final remarks are far from an afterthought. They are the indelible ink that writes your legacy into the audience's minds. Prior to mastering the precise methods for a flawless finish, we must look at the 3 most frequent, catastrophic errors presenters commit when concluding a narrative. You need to ruthlessly eradicate these 3 toxic habits from your speaking repertoire, starting with the first huge blunder, the sudden crash landing. This occurs when a presenter entirely ignores the clock, freaks out, and just ceases speaking without offering any feeling of resolution. They abandon the crowd midway through an idea, sounding something like, "So we attempted to patch the huge glitch, and it was tough. And anyway, I'm out of time. Thanks for being here." This makes the crowd feel utterly confused and shortchanged, as you initiated a mental loop, escalated the suspense, and then totally ditched them without providing the satisfying dopamine hit of a conclusion. It equates to a captain bailing out of an aircraft with a parachute, leaving the travelers to prepare for a brutal crash, which leads us to the second huge error: endless circling. Serving as the direct inverse of the crash landing, this happens when a presenter just lacks the knowledge of how to gracefully leave the platform. After completing their primary narrative, the quiet feels awkward, causing them to tack on pointless concluding ideas, often saying, "in summary," before speaking for 5 more minutes. Following that, they might utter, "just one more point," and ramble for another 5 minutes, looping around the airstrip perpetually, too afraid to finally land. By doing this, you suck all the vitality out of the space, inducing severe cognitive fatigue in your audience until they no longer care about your point and silently pray for you to take a seat. The third monumental blunder is the preacher, which is arguably the most prevalent and irritating tendency found in the art of storytelling. This preachy conclusion occurs when presenters lack faith in their listeners' intellect, destroying a gorgeous, touching narrative by breaking character to hand down a heavy-handed, juvenile moral takeaway. They proclaim, "And the lesson here is to never surrender your aspirations, because diligence is always rewarded." By spelling out the takeaway as though reading from a kid's book, you utterly demean the grown-ups in the audience. You rob them of the chance to decode the significance on their own, transforming a stunning work of art into a tedious, scholastic seminar. Now that we recognize precisely what to steer clear of, we can construct a seamless, practical methodology for concluding your tales, which we shall dub the Perfect Landing Framework. It involves 3 distinct, incredibly dependable strategies you can deploy to nail the conclusion without fail, though you are not required to utilize all 3 simultaneously. You may select the method that most appropriately aligns with the unique context of your presentation, starting with the refined art of the callback. This is a narrative structuring device prominently employed by the world's premier stand-up comics and improv performers, and its underlying concept is remarkably straightforward. You deliberately introduce a particular element, a humorous line, or a distinct item right at the onset of your speech. Then at the absolute conclusion, once the crowd has entirely lost track of that minor detail, you abruptly revive it and present it within a fresh context. The human mind operates as an ultimate pattern-detecting engine, biologically craving recurring sequences, so when you execute a flawless callback, Your listener's mind immediately spots the finished loop. It comes across like a magical illusion, generating a huge, gratifying surge of dopamine while giving the crowd a deep feeling of resolution and purpose. It demonstrates to them that you held complete command over the story from start to finish. So let us examine a very concrete illustration of this strategy. Picture yourself delivering an inspiring address to a cohort of fresh hires, opening your talk with a short, amusing anecdote regarding your own initial day at work. You explain that your anxiety was so high you inadvertently put on two mismatched socks, one red and the other blue. You earn a gentle chuckle before transitioning into the core of your talk, discussing topics like perseverance, collaboration, and conquering immense business hurdles. The listeners entirely lose thought of the socks as you spend 20 minutes covering intense corporate tactics until you arrive at the absolute conclusion of your speech. You prepare to drop your closing remark, but rather than uttering a dull phrase like, "Thanks for listening," you deploy the callback. You hesitate, stare right into the eyes of the fresh hires, and state, "You will confront enormous obstacles at this organization, and you will inevitably stumble. You are going to experience moments of total overwhelm. However, whenever you believe you're flopping, just recall that the individual on this platform managing the whole division still checks his ankles some mornings to ensure his socks coordinate. Welcome aboard." This serves as a totally perfect finale, bringing the whole lengthy speech full circle and discharging the suspense via a soft, self-effacing chuckle. It highlights your common humanity to the crowd and wraps a tidy, beautiful ribbon around the overall event. And to master this method, you just need to revisit your initial hook. Locate a minor, striking element, stash it away mentally, refrain from bringing it up through the core narrative and allow it to sit dormant. Then extract it exactly at the concluding second to spark the dopamine surge of a completed loop, which brings us to our second strategy, the positive pivot or the forward story. This approach is completely crucial if your narrative carries a weighty, sorrowful, or profoundly devastating tone. Whenever you open up about a colossal defeat, a horrific tragedy, or an era of bleak depression, you guide your listeners down into a profound valley of emotion. You spark huge waves of compassion and oxytocin, yet you cannot just abandon them in that shadowy trench. Ending the talk while the mood is still dense and gloomy leaves the crowd feeling exhausted and despairing. You need to offer them an escape route from the shadows by executing a positive pivot, which is the precise instance you redirect the story's trajectory from past suffering toward future optimism. You grasp the agonizing insight you gained and clearly demonstrate how it is presently constructing an improved tomorrow, shifting the frame from what happened to what is possible. Let us examine a clear illustration of this positive pivot by picturing yourself hosting a philanthropic gala for clinical studies. You recount a profoundly heartbreaking, intensely moving narrative regarding the loss of your little sister to an uncommon illness, employing vivid sensory details to paint a picture of the chilly clinical suite. You articulate the crushing grief, leaving the crowd utterly spellbound with many shedding tears, proving you have effectively guided them into that valley. Now, you are required to perform the pivot, as you cannot merely conclude the talk by stating, "And I miss her constantly," which constitutes a crash landing in the pitch black. Rather, you gradually shift your stance, raise your head, and alter your tone from hushed sorrow to hushed power, stating, "The gloom of that medical ward is a burden I will bear forever. Yet gazing at all of you this evening, I recognize her journey did not terminate in that ward, because her courageous battle inspired us to establish this enormous charity. Driven by her legacy, we have financed 3 cutting-edge scientific labs, turning our historical anguish into a tomorrow where no other loved ones will need to endure that icy hospital ward." Her radiance was not extinguished, it merely passed on to each of you. Can you sense the immense, indisputable change in the atmosphere? You paid respect to the disaster without allowing it to triumph, as the positive pivot discharges the dense strain of sorrow and substitutes it with a gorgeous, uplifting surge of optimism. This energizes the crowd, making them feel like they are actively contributing to the cure, and utilizing this approach guarantees your attendees depart feeling uplifted, driven, and profoundly touched. The third and most potent tactic within our system is the singular request, paired directly with the silent finish. This strategy is absolutely required if you are giving a pitch in a business boardroom, a commercial negotiation, or any setting where you definitively require the listeners to execute a distinct move. Most business presentations die a horrible death in the final 60 seconds. A professional will deliver a brilliant, data-backed story, completely convince the executives, and then completely destroy their own momentum by giving the audience way too many options. They will say, so we could proceed with the pilot program, or we could do more market research, or we could schedule another meeting next month to discuss the timeline. This is a fatal error. When you give the human brain multiple paths to choose from at the end of a long presentation, you trigger massive cognitive overload. The executives are tired. They do not want to do the heavy mental lifting of choosing between 3 complicated options. Because they are overwhelmed, they will choose the path of least resistance. They will say, let us think about it, and circle back next week. And exactly as you know, circling back next week simply means the project is completely dead. You must eliminate the options. You must use the single ask. You have told the story. You have established the trouble. You have built the logical chain of cause and effect. Now you must demand one single, highly specific action, not 2 actions, not a vague suggestion, one clear, undeniable demand. Let us practice the single ask. Imagine you are pitching a new software system to your boss. You have used the Pixar framework to explain how much money the old system is wasting. You reach the final slide. You do not ask for feedback. You do not ask for their general thoughts. You look them directly in the eyes and you deliver the single ask. You say, the current system is costing us $10,000 every single week in lost productivity. I am asking for your direct approval to purchase the new software license today, so my team can begin the installation process on Monday morning. That is incredibly powerful. It is clear, it is confident, and it is time-bound. But the single ask is only half of the technique. The true magic happens in the absolute second after you deliver the demand. This brings us to the silence close. After you say the words Monday morning, you must do the hardest thing in the world. You must completely close your mouth and absolutely refuse to speak. The silence will immediately stretch across the room. It will feel heavy. It will feel incredibly uncomfortable. Your anxiety will scream at you to fill the empty air. Your brain will beg you to say, so yeah, let me know what you think, or if that makes sense to you. You must brutally suppress that urge. You must stand in the quiet room and hold the tension. You have firmly placed the ball in their court. By remaining completely silent, you force the audience to confront your demand. You force them to make a decision. The person who speaks next is the person who concedes the power in the room. The silence close projects absolute, unbreakable confidence in your story. It shows the audience that you deeply believe in your resolution and that you do not need to apologize for asking them to act. Practice the silence close in your daily life. Make a clear request to a colleague and then simply wait. You will be absolutely amazed by how quickly people agree with you when you stop nervously justifying your own demands. These 3 techniques, the callback, the positive pivot, and the single ask, give you an incredibly versatile toolkit for landing the plane. But knowing the techniques is not enough. You must also understand the brutal mechanics of rehearsal. If you take only one single piece of practical advice from this entire book, please let it be this. You must memorize your final 3 sentences cold. Most people spend hours practicing the introduction of their speech. They obsess over the opening hook. But by the time they get to rehearsing the ending, they are tired. They think to themselves, I know the general idea of how I want to wrap it up. I will just figure out the exact words when I get there. This is a massive recipe for total disaster. When you are standing on a stage or sitting in a high-stakes meeting, your body is pumping with adrenaline. Your heart is racing. Your cognitive processing power is slightly impaired by the stress. If you do not have your exact final words hardwired into your muscle memory, your brain will completely freeze. You will start rambling. You will start circling the runway. You will ruin the peak-end memory of the audience. You must practice your final 60 seconds until you can literally recite them entirely backwards. You must be able to deliver your final lines if someone wakes you up out of a dead sleep at 3 in the morning. When you know exactly where your ultimate destination is, a profound sense of calm washes over your entire presentation. Even if you completely mess up a section in the middle of your story, you will not panic, because you know with absolute certainty that your landing gear is firmly locked in place. You know you can always safely bring the plane down to the runway. I want you to try a very specific rehearsal exercise the next time you have to deliver a message. Stand in front of a mirror. Do not practice the entire speech. Start exactly 2 minutes from the end. Practice the transition into your final thoughts. Practice the positive pivot. Deliver the single ask. Hold the silence close while staring into your own eyes in the mirror. Do this 10 times in a row. Train your nervous system to feel completely comfortable in the quiet gravity of the final moment. When you step onto the real stage, that ending will be a trusted friend waiting to carry you safely home. We must also discuss the physical body language of the resolution. Your words can be absolutely perfect, but if your body is signaling defeat, the audience will not believe you. Many speakers naturally physically shrink when they reach the end of their story. They drop their shoulders, they look down at the floor, and they literally take a step backward away from the audience. Their body language is silently apologizing for taking up the time of the room. You must do the exact opposite. When you deliver your final thoughts, you must actively plant your feet firmly on the ground. Do not shift your weight from side to side. Stand like an ancient oak tree. Keep your chest open. Maintain direct, sustained eye contact with one single person in the room as you deliver the final sentence. By holding your physical ground, you add a massive amount of subconscious weight to your words. You become an undeniable force of gravity. Let us review the entire journey you have taken through this book. You are no longer the same communicator you were when you read the introduction. You have been completely rewired. You now understand the profound chemistry of connection. You know that human beings are biological machines driven by cortisol, oxytocin, and dopamine. You know that your vulnerability is not a weakness, but a powerful bridge that builds immediate trust and syncs your brainwaves directly with your listeners. You understand the absolute necessity of the hook. You know that attention is the most expensive currency on earth, and you know how to steal it by starting with the trouble. You have completely unlearned the boring academic habit of chronological storytelling. You are bold enough to drop your audience directly into the chaos. You have mastered the Pixar framework. You possess the perfect 8-step skeleton to hold any message upright. You know how to build a tight, logical chain of cause and effect using the powerful words because of that. You know that your audience admires you infinitely more for your messy, difficult trying than for your perfect, flawless successes. You have learned how to put a breathing face on abstract data. You have destroyed the massive, numbing statistics that paralyze the human heart. You know how to isolate the single human being in your story. You have banned empty emotional labels from your vocabulary, replacing them with vivid, physical, sensory anchors that literally hack the cerebral cortex of your listener. You use direct dialogue to reveal the true souls of your characters. And finally, you know exactly how to land the plane. You deeply understand the peak-end rule, ensuring that the final memory your audience carries away is powerful, intentional, and satisfying. You know how to close the loop with a brilliant callback. You know how to pull the room out of the darkness with a positive pivot. You know how to command action with the single ask and the heavy, unbreakable power of the silence close. These tools are incredibly potent. But tools are entirely useless if they remain locked inside a toolbox. The greatest, most beautifully crafted violin in the world makes absolutely no sound until a brave musician is willing to pick it up and drag the bow across the strings. Many people read books about communication, nod their heads in agreement, and then walk right back into their lives and continue speaking exactly the same way they always have. They let fear dictate their voice. They hide behind massive spreadsheets. They recite boring, safe, abstract concepts because they are terrified of being truly seen. They are terrified that if they share their real, messy human experiences, they will be heavily judged. I need you to listen to me very carefully. The world is completely starved for authenticity. We are drowning in a massive ocean of artificial intelligence, robotic corporate jargon, and fake, filtered perfection. We are desperate for someone, anyone, to stand up and tell the actual truth. Your life is a massive, incredibly valuable library of stories. The time you failed that important exam, the time your heart was completely broken, the time you learned to ride a bicycle, the time you had to fire a toxic employee, the quiet afternoon you spent sitting on a porch with your grandfather. These are not trivial events. These are the profound, universal building blocks of the human experience. When you use the frameworks in this book to share those experiences, you give your audience a massive, beautiful gift. You give them permission to be human. You show them that their struggles are normal. You provide them with a map to navigate their own dark valleys. You literally change the chemical makeup of their brains, leaving them more empathetic, more hopeful, and more deeply connected to the world around them. Do not wait for the perfect moment to start using these tools. The perfect moment does not exist. Start tomorrow morning. When someone at the coffee shop asks you how your day is going, do not just say fine. Give them a tiny 10-second story with a hook and a resolution. When you write an email to your team, delete the boring introduction and start right with the trouble. Practice the structure. Flex the muscle. Let the awkwardness wash over you until it becomes a natural, undeniable reflex. Public speaking and storytelling are not magical talents reserved for a lucky chosen few. They are simply mechanical skills, driven by biology and structure. You have the mechanics, you know the science. The only thing left to add is your immense courage. You have a voice that absolutely deserves to be heard. Your unique perspective is deeply needed in the rooms you walk into. Stop minimizing your own experiences. Stop hiding behind the safe wall of boring data. Step out onto the stage, plant your feet firmly on the ground, look the world directly in the eyes, and tell them your story. The audience is sitting in the dark. They are completely silent, and they are desperately waiting for you to begin. I want to thank you from the absolute bottom of my heart for trusting me to be your guide through this incredible material. If you found deep value in our journey together, and if you want to continue mastering the profound art of human connection, personal growth, and communication, please leave a subscribe to join the Audiowaves family. We are going to keep exploring the powerful ideas that help you live your absolute best life. Take care of yourselves. Trust your incredible voice, and I will see you in the next one.